Hello friends, it's Karla here today with Creative Scrapbooker magazine, and we're making a beautiful mixed media floral card today. So here's a look at the card we'll be recreating. You can see the sparkle and shine, and we are going to use some really beautiful Lindy's Magicals. So here's a look at some of the products we'll be using. We've got scrapbook adhesives by 3L, we've got a tape runner and some foam tape here. And then we have the beautiful Lindy's Magicals, and we'll get a closer look at those in a few minutes. Here's some beautiful penny black stamps, and there's some poppies and some sentiments there. We've got some products from Prism Studio, the blending brush, as well as some nesting dies, which are very handy to have when you're card making. We also have some watercolor paper by Prism Studio and some black foil cardstock. And here we have some Ranger products. We've got a clear embossing powder, some Distress Oxide ink, and some archival ink, which we'll be doing some stamping and blending. We have Olfa cutting tools. Here's the scissors. And first we're going to start off with a panel of that really nice Prism Studio watercolor paper. We're going to pop the cover off of this Lindy's Magicals. And in this set, this is the Great White North, so very Canadian. We have 5 different colors. We're going to grab a fan brush, and then a little bit later we'll be using these Ranger paint brushes, and they have a little bit of an angle. So here's a look at the first powder we're going to be using, just dipping our fan brush into the powder and tapping it on the watercolor paper. This first one is called Banff Blue. And I'm not washing my brush off, I'm simply wiping it off on a cloth. Then we're going to the Looney Toony Teal. And again, just tapping those over the surface, and it barely looks like there's anything on there, but once we spray it with water, we're going to see all that gorgeous color. And here we've got the gold powder. It's called Poutine Gold. Love the names that they came up with for this. And here is the magic. So we're just spritzing that with plain water, and you can put as much or as little water on as you like. So we're going to set that aside to dry, and now we're taking a second watercolor panel. We're doing these beautiful, I think these are poppies, and it's the Vivid stamp set. We're going to stamp this with the archival ink first. So it's a black permanent ink. And then we're going to add some embossing, but I wanted to add the black just in case I missed any of the embossing. It would still have the black color. Here's the archival ink cleaner from Ranger. This is really good if you want to get off that permanent ink. And now I'm going over with the clear embossing ink from Ranger. And this is going to allow me to get the embossing powder to stick. Now you don't really have to do the black and the embossing powder, but I just felt like I wanted to have that image and then to have the embossing over top show up in case I missed anything. And that embossing powder is from Tonic. It's a fine black powder. If you get any around the edges, you can just use a paintbrush to get the little stray powders off. And I'm going to use my heat gun and heat that powder until it's melted. Embossing just gives you a little bit extra almost to use your watercolors. We're going to create some watercolors with these beautiful powders. And I'm using a little bit larger brush and just tapping those out onto my craft mat. And this is going to be the watercolor powder after I add some water droplets to it. And then in between, same as the fan brush, I'm just wiping the brush off. So these powders are very pigmented. You're going to get lots of color with them. They're very shiny. You can see as soon as I add a few drops of water to each spot, the color really comes to life, and then I can mix it with my paintbrush. So you can get a lighter color just by adding more water, or a darker, more vibrant color by adding less water. And then I just take the angled brush, and I felt like this worked really well, especially in small areas, because I could use the angled point to get into the little edges, and especially with the stems, those smaller areas. So this is that Ranger paintbrush, and I'm just doing a first layer of the watercolor. This is really so easy, and especially with that embossing, it kind of holds all your watercolor into one spot. It's not going to leak out if you had a little bit of extra water, so it makes it super easy. So I do one layer of just the red, and then I'm mixing, the brown is beaver tail brown, and it's almost like a coppery color. And I'm mixing that with the red, which was O Canada Crimson, to get a little bit darker red. And then I'm just simply adding that darker shading around the edges, around the stamped lines. You don't have to be too precise. I just wanted a few areas that looked darker. And so I do this all over the flowers that I already painted, and it just gives you some shadows and some highlights. And it's really pretty quick to paint these flowers. So after my flowers are done, here's the gold. Again, that poutine gold, and I'm going to add a little bit around the edge of that flower, and then I'm going to do the insides of the flowers. It's a really pretty shade, and I find with these, the color that you're using on top, if the bottom color is fairly dry, is actually going to sit on the top. So if your watercolor was wet, it would do more of a wet on wet blend, but because it was dry, it's going to sit on the top. And you can just see there that I mixed a little bit of that brown with the gold, just to add a little shading. And here I'm bringing in that Banff blue, which is just a stunning blue. And I'm going to paint the little bow. So the bow is pretty detailed and small, and this angled brush was really perfect for getting into those little spots. I'm going to dry this a little bit just because I'm going to do the stems, and I didn't want my color to mix. So I'm taking the gold and mixing it with some of the blue to make green. So don't be afraid to mix your colors to get whatever color you like. And this gives me a really pretty shade of green. And then I'm going to paint the stems. And here you can see, and it's got a lot of shimmer in real life. It's so beautiful. So here we can come back to our panel. And it's almost dry, but I did want to heat it just a little bit. And I felt like I needed, or I wanted, just a little bit more of that teal, that Looney Toony teal color right in the center. So I just added a little bit more on. It's really that easy if you wanted to add a few more elements. And I dried that again with my heat gun, and then I'm just taking the gold that's on my craft mat, and I'm splattering that with the paintbrush to give some gold flecks. Even though we did put some powder on the background, the gold flecks are going to sit right on the top of all that pretty blue and teal color. And here's a look at that really gorgeous shimmery background. Now this is just a quick look at what I would do with the leftover that's on my craft mat, and I just dipped it in a couple times, and then I would just put that piece away and use it for a background. Now my poppies, I'm going to cut those out with the Olfa scissors. These are little stitching scissors, and they're really great for fussy cutting. So I'm just trimming around and leaving a little bit of a white border. And then I wanted to cut out that inside, so I'm using the Olfa cutting knife. and the grid mat, which is a really nice mat to have. It opens up to double the size, but I just needed it folded, so that's perfect. And here's a look at those flowers that's going to go on the front. We have a piece of Creative Scrapbooker Super Stock, which is a really nice thick white cardstock, and I just gave it a really crisp fold with that Prism Studio bone folder. Here's the Prism Studio black foil cardstock that I cut with some of the rectangle nesting dies. They have a stitching edge, and I cut the black a little bit larger with the larger nesting die. And then the panel, the watercolor panel, that's cut with the next size down. So they're perfectly going to be evenly spaced. And then I can start adding things onto the front. So I cut a little panel or a little banner with the nested banner dies, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment on with this penny black sentiment set. I really love the script and the typed font there. So we have that on, and now we're going to just add a little bit of color with our Stormy Sky Distress Oxide. And that matches the colors that we have on the background and just gives it a little bit of color. And then I can position everything on. So I've got that Scrapbook Adhesives by 3L tape runner. That was really handy to put on the panels as well as the banner. And I'm just going to trim off with those Olfa scissors anything that's sticking over the edge. Now I can take the Scrapbook Adhesives by 3L, and these are the adhesive squares. And I'm just placing those on the back of those flowers. And you can get a pack that has mixed large and small, so you can adjust whichever size square you would like. And then we can simply just place that onto the background. Here we've got some adhesive dots, and I have some Pink Fresh gems, so we can use the adhesive glue dots to just add our gems onto the background and just add one more element of gold. The craft knife is also really handy if you want to help you put the gems on. So here's a look at that finished card. We've got the bright blue and the red and then the gold in there. So I hope you'll check out some of these awesome products that we featured today, the Lindy's Magicals and Penny Black and all the other fun things. And I hope you have an amazing and very crafty week ahead.